hear, I obey. Yes, my liege. Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to Max's Models. And my Lord and High Master here has agreed to let me do a show early this morning. A lot of honeydews to do later today, so I thought I'd get an early start. And speaking of which, my wife told me the other day I had left the cabinet open here, and she said she found honey in there on the lower shelf with the model helicopters, making herself comfortable. And I was like, please tell me you got a picture. But she says, no, I shoot her out of there. Like, oh, that would have been the website or the channel cover photo. Maybe I'll get her to do it again sometime, because she likes models too, don't you, sweetheart? Well, anyway, so a couple of things I forgot to mention last night. One was that on top of everything else, I'm also trying to get the Dan Gurney figurine from Immense Miniatures painted, so that I can put it with the Dodge Ram Charger when I'm done. Yeah, I think I'm going to do that Ram Charger. I'm not going to. The hood comes with the scoop as an add-on, and I think I'm going to do like a compromise build. It's going to have the Hemi and everything, but I'm not going to put in the roll bar or the put the scoop on the hood, so it'll sort of have that stock car look, but we'll all know it's a fake out with what's underneath. And I'm sure it'd probably have to have the scoop if it had the Hemi, but it's a compromise. That way I get to make the cool motor for it, but at the same time I still get to have sort of a nostalgic looking model car. By the way, you guys may recall just recently we were talking about the Cessna O2s, the Skymasters, and just this morning when I was opening my email, I found a review of the kit for this new kit. I believe it's from Rodin, and I didn't realize it's a 1/32 scale Skymaster. And to my knowledge, the only 1/32 scale made, and it's in the Navy markings. The Navy had got a half dozen or so from the Air Force for range control. But it does have, they say the kit does have the parts necessary if you want to put it in, make an Air Force aircraft that just doesn't have the markings for it. Looks like a nice kit. Well, I say that some of the parts, some of the sprue areas where the runners join the parts, look like once they're clipped off, there could be a fair bit of filing, but still, it could be a good kit. I don't know, but it's an interesting subject. Glad to see somebody's finally making those kinds of airplanes on a larger scale. And ooh, you're just adorable. She's got it dialed up to 11 this morning. I read a couple of pages of that book on General Jimmy Doolittle, and yeah, it's a really thick book, but he's one of the few people that's led a life that is so interesting it can fill up a book like that without being boring. But a lot of people, everyone, you say Doolittle, most people think of Jimmy Doolittle and the Doolittle Raiders, and that's certainly one of the seminal moments of his life. But he did so much more for aviation. I mean, he was a true pioneer, not only as a race pilot, but also with early instrument flying and just so much more. There's been many documentaries done to him, and for good reason. But when you think of what some people call the American spirit or the pioneer spirit, or the American ability to go out and solve problems, I mean, he's the poster child for that. He advanced aviation so much, and he lived to a ripe old age. And anyway, he was definitely one of a kind. And I think one of the things that makes him different from a lot of people that we read about in history, and I'm not trying to in any way diminish or belittle anybody, I'm just thinking that not everything he did was dependent on the war or the government doing this. A lot of the stuff he did on his own. And so he's got this unique blend of doing stuff on his own, you know, kind of like Dr. Robert Goddard did. You know, Goddard was always scraping to find money to get rockets built. And then, of course, great accomplishments by virtue of the war, like so many of our other famous aviators who were only famous because the war came along and created the opportunity for them. And well, that's the title of his book, I Could Never Be So Lucky Again. He came along when a man of his skills could solve, so when aviation needed so many problems to be solved, and he was just the right guy to do it. And of course he didn't work alone, but there's an old story about the Granville brothers. You know, he won a lot of races with his GB racers, but the Granville brothers had wanted to sell the airplane to the military as a fighter, and supposedly, of course, this is, you know, stuff your dad tells you when he's, chatting with his friends and everything. As well, you know, Doolittle was like, you know, we put a bunch of second lieutenants in those GB racers, we're going to have them crashing all over the place, which is probably true. So the military never adopted the airplane as a fighter, and rumor has it that the Granny Granville never forgave him for that, but that's just kind of the, you know, your dad's generation chatting. And but there may be some truth to it. He was right, though. If you put a bunch of Army second lieutenants into GB racers, you'd have had those things splatter all over the place. And as Doolittle himself pointed out, the airplane was really fast, but it couldn't turn for nothing, for anything. I mean, he even said when he was winning trophies with it that I make it up on the straightaways. I don't try to round the pylons real tight, because the airplane just couldn't maneuver with those other aircraft. And the GB had a fairly bad accident rate, but then you're talking about early technology and an airplane that was flying on the edge. And then there were different versions of the GB also. There's the famous footage of one just shearing apart in flight, spinning, crashing, killing a famous pilot. Most articles I've read have said that it was probably aileron flutter, but I've read one that said that a gas cap came off and went through the windshield. So I don't know. All I know is it's pretty violent footage, and whatever happened, it happened quick, and the pilot had no chance to do anything about it. But believe it or not, early airplanes coming apart wasn't that uncommon. You know, these airplanes of the 30s may look like, you know, airplanes as we think of them today, but aviation was still new, and a lot of these guys are pushing the edge. So anyway, back on the model front, somebody was talking about, it was actually the same video I just watched. They were talking about Angora put out a 1/2 scale Terminator. It's like 3 feet tall. I guess it's pretty expensive, but apparently it uses a lot of metal parts, real metal, and uses screwdrivers to put it together, as well as some coated plastic parts, multimedia. It's got electronics in it. And I mean, that's a model, but they say you have to use super glue on it. But I mean, it's got plastic parts, so I guess it's a styrene kit. But the whole idea of you know, when you start using screws and metal, I guess you would just qualify that as a multimedia kit. And I was never a big enough Terminator fan to spend that kind of money on something like that. Plus, 3 feet tall. One of them made the joke about, you can leave it in your room as a nightlight. I was like, nightmare fuel. I was like, yeah, that's the last thing you need to see drifting off. Why do you think I put Godzilla on top of the shelf? Anyway, one thing I meant to talk about last night. I did talk about it some, but you know, I don't script these things, so I tend to ramble on. Just jumping back to the Phantom real quick. As some people have pointed out, yes, the F4H was the first designation of the airplane, and when the Air Force decided to adopt a naval aircraft, they gave it their own name. They call it the F-110 Spectre for apparently a very short time before, I think it was in '62, that I don't know if it came down from Congress, Department of Defense, but the rules passed that we need to normalize these nomenclatures. So everybody just called the Phantom the F4, and I guess the Air Force adopted the name at the same time. But the there was somebody was asking about, well, aren't the F-111 and F-117 part of the Century series? And that's a real can of worms. But in a nutshell, no. The Century series of aircraft goes F-100 to F-107, and the 107 wasn't adopted, and nor was the 103. And that's the Century series. One of the reasons that the F-111, all the Century series aircraft were, if I'm not mistaken, and correct me if I'm wrong, they were all Air Force projects, and they were all developed under a Century series name. They weren't renamed from something else. And the F-111 was actually originally part of the TFX program, and I'm not sure when it got the name F-111. And it was not a fighter, it was a bomber. Now, supposedly, before you burn up the keyboard, I'm going there. The idea it was a McNamara operation. Oh my God, she's just bundled up here like a big fur ball. She's so comfortable. The TFX was McNamara's idea of one airplane for all the services that did all the jobs, fighter, bomber, you know, and that just wasn't going to happen. And there's a really good story. You can read the book on about John Boyd, 42nd John. And when the F-111 got to Eglin for testing, the Boyd apparently was at the O Club, and they used to call him the Ghetto Major, and he just ripped into one of the engineers about that airplane wasn't a fighter. And to the head engineer's credit, had quite the ego stake in this airplane and sweat equity investment. He listened to Boyd, and he learned a lot, but the airplane simply wasn't a fighter. And I believe it was a Navy admiral. They managed to land the early prototype TFX on a carrier once or twice. I think they may have only done it once and cat shot it, and they barely were able to do it. And they said, I believe his quote was, testifying to Congress or something, was that all the power in Christendom couldn't make a fighter out of that plane. And in some ways, McNamara was a really, really sharp guy. In other ways, he was just a train wreck, and he kind of ran hot and cold. But and I don't mean to get off on that, because I'm sure a lot of you guys have strong opinions on McNamara. It seems like everybody does. But the F-111 just was never a fighter. And of course the F-117 was labeled a fighter, but it wasn't. Didn't even have a gun or an offensive missile. It was strictly a tactical bomber. I'm not sure why they even gave it the F designation. I'm sure they had their reasons. It could have been political. It could have been something to do with treaties or something. But as we all know, in fact, didn't they later call it the FB-111? But the F-111 and the F-117 were not Century Series aircraft, and or at least they're not, by aviation aficionados, not considered them. And the Phantom, some people say it was the last of Century Series because it was the F-110 Spectre for a while, and some say no, it was never developed as the F-110. That was just a nomenclature thing that was short-lived, so they don't count it. And I think it's kind of one of those sort of fun fact sort of things, but it's seriously the Century Series, at least for my money. And again, this is my opinion, and it's worth everything you paid for it. It's the F-100 to the F-107. And that's not to belittle anybody that thinks the F-110 counts as a Century Series. I mean, it's hardly a point worth getting in a bar fight over, but that's the way I see it from Max's little portal. And my Lord and High Master agrees. So but if you want to do an interesting kit bash, I suppose you could take a kit model of an F-117 and try to make a tactical fighter out of it. I mean, an actual real fighter version. I'm not exactly sure how you would do that because the weapons are stored internally. I mean, I suppose you go the short route and hang missiles off of it. But maybe you could have it, with the bay open and the missiles coming down on racks, like Sidewinders or something, or AMRAAMs. But, or you could add some external accoutrements to it, maybe some high maneuverability fins and stuff. I've got that big tester's kit in there that I've never gotten around to that would be the perfect thing to modify because it was a cheap kit, but it's big. I might make a project someday. Of course, the F-117, you could pretty much do a decal swap, put Klingon decals on it, and it would look perfect for the role. Anyway, well, that's all I got for this morning, and I gotta go get ready to go out and do errands to run and things to do. Ooh, you're just so adorable. You don't want me to move. And guys, you have a wonderful morning. And she's occupied my hand. I can't salute this morning, so model on.